Today my guest is Richard Killen, a licensed insolvency trustee and also a licensed consumer proposal administrator. He's been in the business for 35 years as a trustee, as a regulator on consumer credit side of things as well. And today we're going to talk about debt relief, and I can't think of a better person to discuss that with than with Richard. So Richard, well.
Thank you, Ken. You did very well on all those big words.
Thank you very much. So debt is, I want to jump right into this. So debt is really the big elephant in the room, right? A lot of people have debt. You know, it's affecting their career, it's affecting their family life. They can't sleep at night, they're stressed right out. Why is it that people that have debt problems and they're looking for debt relief, why is it that they don't come and see somebody such as yourself, a trustee, sooner?
That's a good question. It's a question that probably all trustees have asked themselves over the year. After all, we don't have horns or anything like that, so we provide a service. I think in most people's minds, it's a service. Well, let me put it this way: how many people just go to the doctor just on a whim? Or just,
not many.
You know, that kind of thing. It has that kind of cachet, I think, with most people. I suppose in most people's minds there's an element of fear of the unknown. They know that they have a problem. They have a bad problem. You know, in some cases a very bad problem, and they know that something has to be done about it. But it's one thing to know that. It's another thing to to be able to face up to the possibilities that there may be some consequences to these things. And like anything else, the unknown creates a fear, or maybe there is just a genuine fear of the unknown. Mm-hmm. And because of that, the tendency for probably is just part of human nature is to avoid that as much as possible or as long as possible, and not to have to delve into it. Let's face it, nobody that I know of, when they graduated from high school, wrote it down on their list of things to do to someday visit an insolvency trustee. Mm-hmm.
No, exactly. And as I've heard you say before, right? This happens to a lot of good, honest people, but unfortunately, some of us, due to different circumstances, get into debt problems. So, Richard, what is the biggest fear that people have when they first meet with you? Like, do they feel that they're gonna lose their house? They're gonna lose all of their possessions? Is that like the number one fear that they have?
Probably. I think you probably would want to classify it this way, or sort it out this way. It's the fear of the unknown. Period. Even with the internet nowadays, people do research the thing. If they make an appointment to see a trustee, they'll very often do some research on the internet. Perhaps they do it even without making an appointment with a trustee. But the internet won't tell them what they really need to know, and there's still that element. Even when they come in, there's the element of what's going to happen. Okay? Now, obviously, the things that are most important to them are going to be their priority. If they own a house, they're going to be afraid they're going to lose their house. If they don't own a house, but they have a car, and their car is essential to get them to work and all that, they're afraid, what's going to happen. These are just ordinary human realities. So, what's the most important thing? Not everybody owns a house. Mm-hmm. Not everybody has any specific thing. The fear of something, some negative consequence of a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal is probably what's going to play foremost in their minds.
Okay. So we should probably distinguish right up front, what's the difference between a bankruptcy and a consumer proposal?
You won't be astounded, Ken, to know that I'm frequently asked that question. Mm-hmm. And it just so happens that I do have a good answer for it, or a practiced answer anyway. Let's understand firstly that they're both legal processes. They're both they're the two main options offered by the one law that we have in this country called the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act. One law that we have that is designed to resolve the problem that exists when a person can't pay their legally enforceable debts. In other words, you have a bunch of people, or often a bunch of people with their hand out saying, give me my money, you owe me this money, give me my money. And you have especially the more honest the person, the more difficult this is, I suppose. But the person is in a position to say, I can't pay you. Not I won't pay you, I can't pay you. That's a difficult thing to live with. And for both sides,
Yep.
for both parties. What do you do? Well, creditors have a formula for resolving that problem in their favor, fixing the problem from their point of view. What does the debtor do? What can he do? And retain some kind of control over things, because creditors can pursue and they can use the law. They can there are things like collection agencies, and then there's the legal process where a person can get sued. You can sue somebody to get a judgment, and with the judgment you can enforce collection and things like that. These are the things that creditors can do. But when you start doing that, the average debtor's life just it's just blown apart. So. The people of Canada long ago came up with a solution, and it was called the Bankruptcy Act, now called the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, and it provides two processes that are theirs for people to say, look, I can't pay my debts, I don't want everything to just get completely out of control here, I don't want to run away from the problem, so what can I do? Well, you can do a consumer proposal or you can do a bankruptcy, your choice. You have to be, it's a very simple qualification, actually. You have to owe at least $1,000 collectively. You have to reside or carry on business or in Canada, or the majority of your assets are in Canada. And you have to be insolvent. And the definition of that is to be unable to meet your liabilities generally as they come due. That's one of the three definitions of it. And generally, what it means is you can't keep all your creditors happy all the time. Now, most consumer credit involves monthly payments, some kind of minimum monthly payments and all that. So a person who can no longer meet the minimum monthly payment required by the credit card company or the loan or the line of credit or whatnot, all of them, it's no good to just pay one guy this month and another guy next month. Creditors can't live with that, right? And rightly so. So that makes a person insolvent. So if the person owes $1,000 and resides in Canada, they qualify to use the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act. Now, if they're going to use it, how are they going to use it? Well, it's like anything else. They're going to try to weigh the pros and cons and whatnot. Now, interestingly, in 1992, when the law was amended to create consumer proposals, it was late in the year, so the 92 really doesn't count very much, but 93, 94, there weren't many consumer proposals filed at all. First of all, it was relatively unknown, and second of all, it's just, it's not the way people thought. They thought trustee, bankruptcy, bankruptcy, and all that. And probably trustees thought maybe the same way as well. Now, over the years, though, and especially in the latter part of the first decade of this millennium, this century, proposals started to become more well-known and more used, to the point where I don't know what the overall statistics are, but I can tell you something about our own statistics at Richard Killen and Associates. We've been, for the past, 3-4 years, 45% or so of the people who file with us are going to file a consumer proposal. It's almost up to half. Okay? Now, the difference between the two is that in a bankruptcy, what you're doing really is you're asking the courts to issue an order, in other words, at the stroke of a pen, rid you of your debts, okay, release you from your debts. In a proposal, you're not asking the court to do anything specific, really, for you, other than to ratify what you and your creditors can come up with. In other words, you're going to say to your creditors, look, I don't want to go bankrupt, I'm going to offer you some money. Please accept this as a settlement, as a complete settlement for what I owe you. And the amount of money being offered may not be the total amount owed, okay, but it may be the best the person can do. It likely is. And in today's world, creditors are aware enough that they can see when when it's a rational, what would you say? A best case deal, where the person is offering the best they can do, and they most often go along with it.
Okay, so when somebody comes in to see you, that's part of the process that they would go through. They would go through You'd go through, their assets, their liabilities, and you would help them to determine what that amount should be, right? And that's based on how much they can pay back?
Yeah, there's an important definition that has to be made here, though. It's not the trustee's job to direct a person. It's the trustee's job at the consultative stage. It's the trustee's job to inform the person. Mm-hmm. The way I put it to people, I say, look, I'm not your friend. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to be your friend. I'm going to be your trustee. Mm-hmm. Yeah. My role is not to be an advocate for one side or the other. In fact, that is specifically my role. I have the same kind of relationship with the people that the court itself has. Okay, it's impartial. So my job is to essentially get people to where this whole process is supposed to take, right? Steer the whole thing. Yeah? So when they come in, that first meeting we have is informative. It's consultative, but in the sense of us telling them information, not telling them what to do, mm-hmm. That kind of thing. Now, does that mean that there's nothing that we say is of any help to them in trying to determine what the best thing? Of course, it's going to be some help, okay? But not because we're steering them in that direction so much as just because of
right.
the actual information that we're imparting to them, and people can figure things out.
Yeah. So you're basically outlining all of the different options
Yep.
that are available to them.
The options, the consequences, mm-hmm. and perhaps the most important thing is dispelling their fears. Mm-hmm. We covered that a little at various times. Kind of the idea that when people come in to see us, they're afraid. I mean, you've asked me before what they're most afraid of, right? One of the things that we do is in the process of this is we just basically show people here's the way the system works, mm-hmm. okay, and here's what's going to happen. And when you find out what's going to happen, all of a sudden the lights go off, and oh, okay, yeah, I can live with that. That kind of thinking that goes with it. Okay? And interestingly, and it may be why people half the people do proposals. When I say half the people do proposals, I would suspect that 75% of the people come in, and one of the first things out of their mouth is, I don't want to do bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. They come in with the idea of doing a
right.
proposal. They find out later, in the process, perhaps they come to the conclusion saying, I can't offer a valid proposal, a viable proposal. There's nothing I can do here. Mm-hmm. So they have to back off maybe and do the bankruptcy. But their intention, it's interesting. Call it human nature or something, I don't know. But people don't want to just walk away. I'm asked the question sometime, and I may be anticipating something that you're going to ask me, but there's a thing that people, sometimes it comes up in the conversation in these initial interviews, the idea that somehow or other a proposal or a bankruptcy would be a cop-out, some kind of a, mm-hmm. And I point out to people, I said, when people walk through our door, the last thing they're trying to do is run away from the problem. Mm-hmm. Trying to deal with it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, and I get that. So what is, again, there's a lot of people that are kind of sitting at home right now, they're stressed out, right? They're not sleeping. What are kind of like some of the telltale signs that, now you've reached the point where you should come and talk to a trustee?
Well, you want my suggestion here?
Suggestion, right? So,
okay.
So in other words, if I've got, just to be a little clearer, so if I've got a bunch of debt and I'm making my monthly commitments, maybe I'm not getting ahead, mm-hmm. Or I'm, getting slightly behind. When does the point come when I go, now's the time to talk to a trustee? And what if, I'm going to add something to that, what if I talk to a trustee and at the end of the day, I decide not to do anything? Mm. Is there a cost associated with that?
Oh, no, there's no cost at all. I don't know of any trustee in the Toronto area anyway who charges a fee for that consultation. Okay? That's a free consultation. It's in the ads that we'll put in whatever print advertising we mm-hmm. do. A free consultation. Yeah. Hopefully, you get much more than your money's worth. That's a joke. Okay? But is there a particular moment, a particular time? Well, I was going to say something glib. It went through my mind. I said, when's the time to change your oil in your car? Now, but that's too good because that's not the way humans work and all that. So I say that as a joke, but it doesn't apply. The reality is that there's a progression to everything. We don't start off insolvent. Insolvency is something that happens all too often, perhaps the majority of times. It happens in a very unobtrusive, almost invisible way to people. Yeah. Nobody really wants to give up, do they?
No, they don't. And that was really the why I was asking the question, because I think there's a lot of people out there that are stressed, that are like desperate, and you know, there's that fear that's kind of holding them back to come and talk to somebody like yourself. You know, so, and I was just trying to paint a picture, you know, like if you're going for payday loans, right? If you're, you know, borrowing from one credit card to pay another credit card off, right? You know, I think if you're in that kind of situation, maybe that's the time to sit down with the trustee.
Yeah. Well, those are the obvious signs, right? When you're actually sinking deeper into debt, in spite of your best efforts, in spite of everything you're trying to do. But long before that, it really boils down to what is that meeting going to be about? It's going to be about information. Since when does information hurt you? That kind
Never.
of information.
Yeah.
You know, if nothing else, if I say to people, you got nothing to lose. You know, you come in, we talk, we assess things for you, we tell you how things would go, we tell you what your options are, we tell you what the likely consequences of things and all that kind of stuff. And in the end, you go, well, thank you very much, and you take the material that we're giving you, and you walk away and you think about it. And that's what happens. The majority of people, that's what they do. You know, so that fear of coming to see the trustee. Maybe it's really a fear of admission. Maybe you're admitting something to yourself that you really don't want to admit. Okay? And as a trustee, I know there's nothing I can do about that, you know, except to say at this point here, where we're sitting here, that's really a very bad reason not to go and get information. Yeah.
All right, so
counterproductive, should we say? Right?
So I guess really where I'm the line of question I'm really going is that, you know, people should come in and see you sooner before it gets too bad, and yet there's a reluctance, there's a fear on their part, and maybe some of the other questions would be, you know, for example, if I come in to see you, and I am going to go for a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy, does my employer find it, for example?
Yeah.
Like is it just between me and you, or is there a way that
the consultation is entirely what's the word, private, or can't think of the word now.
Well, private, right? Confidential.
Confidential, that's the word. Aside from the fact that there are privacy laws, both provincial and federal, that in fact dictate that whatever you tell me, if you come in to see me in my professional capacity, whatever you tell me has to stay between you and me, unless you allow me to tell somebody else. Right? That is the essence of privacy laws. Right?
Okay.
But aside from that, there's practical and moral things involved too. Moral thing. You know, who am I to blab about anything you tell me? Especially when you're coming in to tell me something that is so private and so important to you as this, right? I mean, where's the respect? So there's that. And then, you know, from a practical point of view, I haven't done anything for you. I'm not working for you. Of course that information has to stay with me. You know, I'm not going to give it to anybody else. You know? This business of the fear of what did I say before? You know, the fear of
the unknown.
That's not just the unknown. It's that somehow or other this is an admission of some kind of negative feelings. It's admitting your negative take on your situation. Right? Those things are all within ourselves. Right? We have to overcome these things ourselves. Okay? You'll note in our advertisements, Ken, practically all our advertisements have this little slogan at the end. It may be the most stress-relieving call you ever make. And I came up with this years ago. It was something that evolved out of what my customers tell me, or have told me over the years, okay, boy, I should have called you 2 years before. That kind of thing. Okay, don't know why I didn't. And it always came back to the idea that I felt so much relief, and that can happen with the first interview. Many of these people hadn't even done anything yet. They're going home to decide and think about it and all that, but they felt this immense weight off their shoulders. That's but people don't know that until they actually experience it, right?
Right, because everything is out on the table, and at that point, you're presenting, you're educating them on all the options that they have.
That's right.
And at that point, they realize that there is a way out.
People come in feeling a sense of hopelessness to some extent, to a large extent. Okay, they leave with hope. Plan. Sometimes their problem's already solved.
Right.
Depends.
Okay. One of the other fears, I know I keep coming back to that word.
You don't want to come and see me yourself, do you, Ken?
Not today. Maybe next week. But actually, maybe after I ask you this question, if I come and see you, and again, this is initially in our first conversation. What if, for example, my marriage is already strained, and the last thing in the world I want to do is kind of add to that. I can come in and see you without my spouse, and we can have a confidential conversation, and my spouse does not need to be there initially. At least at that point I can come in, I can find out what my options are, and decide what to do.
Sure. Well, whoever comes in and sits across from me is the person I'm talking to, be it one person or 5 people.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about kind of how people get into debt. And actually, one of the things I found was very interesting when we chatted before was, what is the range of debt that people come to see you for?
Well, the government will have statistics on that. What happens in both a bankruptcy and a proposal is once it's filed, and when we say filed, these things get filed with the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy, or a person called the official receiver, technically. All goes into the central data bank, and they've got the statistics and all that. But the significance of that is really, it's not really the amount. Okay, I use the little questionnaire. I think I've asked you this before. If you owe $1 million and you have $2 million in the bank, do you have a problem?
No, obviously you don't.
You just write a check, pay off your debts, and you still got $1 million, right? But if you owe $100 and you don't have 2 dimes to rub together, do you have a problem?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. And that's what it amounts to. Right? So it's all subjective. It's personal. It's when I say subjective, some of it's maybe not subjective, but it's objective in all its variations. Right? Not $100, but $10,000 of debt can be immense to one person and nothing to another. Right? On the other hand, $100,000 of debt can be, stratospheric to some people, but to other people, it's just something that they play with every month. Right? So it's not an amount of debt. It's a what would you call it? It's a again, I can't think of the proper word, but it's a circumstantial thing. It suits the circumstances of the individual. Okay, and if it becomes a problem, or if it looks like it might become a problem, or even if you're just wondering if it's going to become a problem because of things that you foresee happening at work, or maybe your marital situation, or any of those things, okay, then that you go see a trustee and get information. Okay? With that information, then at least you're better armed to deal with the future, right? And all that. You mentioned something about that a minute ago. The idea of something's going wrong with a marriage, or something's going wrong at work, and all the rest of that stuff. A lot of people ask me, and in fact, there's a booklet that I give people after they've come in for that initial consultation, and it's a question and answer thing, really. And these are the main questions that I've been asked by people over the years, and I've written some short point type answers, But some of the things, some of the questions that I get asked: is this going to affect my wife? Is this going to affect my husband? Is this going to affect my job? Things like that. Okay? And if you think about it, you're wandering around trying to deal with a problem that really might be out of your control, and you may not realize it yet. Okay? But it's getting out of control, and you don't really have a handle on it, and it's going to get out of control, or whatever, right? Well, what's that doing to your marriage?
Yep.
What's that doing to your job performance? Among others, the two very important parts of most people's lives, right? I suggest that perhaps if you go see a trustee and solve the problem, it might improve both those things. Who knows?